So just for everybody's benefit, like the technical beginning of Black Lives Matter, or, you know, a group of activists after Trayvon Martin was killed in Florida by George Zimmerman, that's when the movement started. It was not only a continuation of the civil rights struggle that we've always had in this country. A lot of people think of it as an updated, sit-in movement, what was going on in the 50s and 60s. And in some ways it is, but what it was also intended to do was to make sure that within that movement for increased civil rights, that we don't leave people out that have been left out before, like African-American women, the LGBT community, all of these voices within Black and Brown communities that have their larger struggle and then the struggle for their smaller group. Sometimes their messages were not included. So that's a short version of how Black Lives Matter started, and it also coincided with, unfortunately, if you ask some people in this country that aren't Black and Brown about police brutality and Trayvon Martin and George Floyd and the dozens of others, they would say, oh yes, this is horrible. You know, it just started a few years ago. And Black people in this country know that it didn't start a few years ago. What did start is that we now have the technology to let everybody know what's going on, that you didn't believe us when we told you. But now you get to see it with your own eyes. And I mean, that's incredibly positive, because there are a lot of people that didn't believe that police brutality, for example, was a real thing. And the technology has allowed everybody to see with their own eyes. So what do we do with Black Lives Matter now, here in 2020? I actually do think that it is a movement, and it's not just hype. I think that people have realized that it best expresses what we don't have in this country, and that is a value of Black lives on several levels. Now, here's where we get into the challenge, is as with any movement, especially movements in their beginning, a lot of times people that don't agree with the goals of the movement attack the people who personify in their mind the movement. One of the things I'm very quick to point out here in this country is, you know, you have people like Martin Luther King and John Lewis, and you would hear some people today talk about how they just loved Martin Luther King and how he was our, you know, this great leader for us, and he was. But I want to say, you're part of the same group of people in the way that you act that didn't like Martin Luther King then. Don't forget, he was assassinated. He was ruffling feathers. He was agitating. And so that's why, you know, when you have leaders at all levels in this country are saying that the protesters of Black Lives Matter, that they're anarchists, that they're agitators, that they're not peaceful, some of that is true. There are people that are trying to infiltrate the protest to introduce violence in it. I mean, that's happening for sure. But we also have to remember that in the moment, no real effective movement is viewed positively by the people that need to change their actions for it to be successful. We can now look back at Martin Luther King after all of these decades, because that seems easy to say. But we have those same people who said they love Martin Luther King on TV and in the news criticizing Black Lives Matter. And so one of the things we have to make sure of is that the messaging that we use in our own lives and our efforts in our organizations, that we clearly articulate what Black Lives Matter is, that we recognize that not everybody who supports it supports the same things. And what we have to make sure is that somebody who does something that, if you're an African American, you don't agree with, and they put a hashtag Black Lives Matter on it, nobody can hijack the movement to make it mean one specific thing. Because if we do, then that allows people who have no interest in improving situations to say, well, no, you can't be a Black Lives Matter. There was a violent Black Lives Matter protest there. So if you're for that, you're for terrorism. And if you don't think that's happening, our president already said it here. So I do think that it is a movement. I do think it's more than hype. And I do think that we're going to have to be more careful and pay attention going forward as to what it means and how it reflects the ways that we protest, that we ask for change, that we demand reforms legally, from the police, economically, in all those fields.
Thank you.